Konrad has been to Hessen to see what's going on with the investigations into two of the more famous far-right crimes that Germany has witnessed in the last few years, which was obviously delightful. And it's been raining. There's only one thing for it: lemonade and whiskey.
Hello everyone, it's time for another episode of Megan's Megacan. I'm Megan. I'm here in a very wet and horrible Berlin, but that's okay because I'm here with Expreneur Magazine and Konrad Werner. Hello, Konrad.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Happy birthday.
Oh, thanks.
For last week.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this episode a little bit later than usual.
Oh, yeah.
Is because
you were in no fit state to do a podcast.
Absolutely was not. Neither the Friday before, which when we usually do them, when I had my wisdom teeth out.
Yeah.
Did I show you a picture of my face?
Yeah, you did.
Wow. Yeah, that was really bad. And then last week was my birthday, so we went to the pub instead.
Yeah. So now we're here on a Monday night drinking.
Yes. But you got me an amazing birthday card. Do you want to explain what was inside the birthday card?
Well, I thought I was trying to think of things that you like, and then I remembered you like a young Marcus Zerder.
Honestly, this picture, I can take a picture of it and we can attach it to this episode because he is, as you said, in his Elvis years.
Yeah.
And he sort of turned a chair backwards and has one leg up on the chair that he's then kind of like leaning an elbow on. It's not alluring. Let me tell you. He's got like a little
Elvis quiff as well. He's doing like a quiff. He likes to post things like that on his social media accounts.
Whoever is doing his Instagram, either it is him himself, which I suspect a lot of it is, or the person is a genius, or Marcus Zerder's genius. I don't know. It's confusing.
And there's like dry ice. Is it's like a bit smoky around him?
Oh, God knows. Yeah, it's. But that, I'm afraid, I think might be looking at the rundown of what we're going to talk today. That may be your last bit of good news.
That might be the last bit of good.
Buckle up, everybody, and let's have a Megacan.
Okay, what have you got for us?
I brought, because it's shite weather, and I saw these Lynchburg lemonades, and they're really nice, so let's just have one of these.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
I needed something sweet and lemony, and
that's great.
Yeah, so cheers.
Cheers. One more drink.
Yeah, get it into you. Not like I nearly died on Saturday from my 36-year-old hangover. That's excellent. That's superb.
Very nice. One of the best.
So on Saturday, just I think is worth mentioning, we had the second anniversary of the Hanau attack, where 11 people were killed by a shooter who shot in 2 shisha bars in Hanau before killing his mother and himself. And you were saying that there's a parliamentary inquiry going on into that, and where's that happening?
In Hesse. Yeah, so Hesse is the state where quite a lot of far-right attacks seem to happen.
What's going on in Hesse?
I went a week earlier. I wasn't actually reporting on the Hanau inquiry. I was reporting on the Lübcke inquiry, which was also going on in Hesse at the same time. And you might remember Walter Lübcke was a conservative politician.
Yeah.
Who was shot on his porch by a neo-Nazi in June 2019. A man was convicted, a neo-Nazi was convicted last year, but a lot of questions remain open, and these parliamentary inquiries have been set up to answer a few of these questions. And in the Lübcke's case, the main question is, how did he manage, like, who helped him? How is he supposed to have done this on his own? And the other big question is, this is a man who was under observation by the Verfassungsschutz, the domestic intelligence. Years earlier, he'd had several violent crimes in his history, also racist violent crimes. The big thing is that like a few years before it happened, the term they used was abgekühlt. They decided that he was no longer worth following, and he was no longer a very serious, dangerous neo-Nazi, so they stopped tracking him. And
how do they make these decisions?
Well, it's like that's another thing about the inquiry. The inquiry has been going on for over a year already, ever since the trial. In fact, ever since the conviction ended, the inquiry started. So it's been going on for a year already. They've already had 23 sessions in the parliament.
Wow.
And we're about halfway through. It's going to go into 2023 before they come to a conclusion, because they're asking every witness you can possibly imagine, like the expert witnesses, different people that could have known something. And the parliament has the power to invite domestic intelligence agents, police officers. When on the day that I was there, was the prosecutor of the murder trial was there, the chief prosecutor, and he said, and then one little bit of news that came out of the day that I was there was that he said that even though a man has been convicted for this murder, the investigation is not closed, and they are still searching for possible accomplices, even though they don't have any.
Didn't we cover this? And there was some kind of like the guy who was prosecuted changed his story or something, or was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I am thinking of some white man name and initial, and then he was like Dick.
Stefan E.
But wasn't there like a Martin or something involved?
There was a Marcus H.
I genuinely.
So Marcus H. was initially also a defendant, and then they but they only convicted him of like a low level weapons possession thing. Like he had he had several weapons, but most of them were licensed, and then he had one weapon that he didn't have a license for, so they got him, like they gave him a suspended sentence. But the thing is, he knew the convicted killer very well, and they were very close. You know, the story is that he probably supplied the gun to him. So there's a lot of these things haven't been cleared up. For example, how Stefan E got the gun, because he didn't have a gun license, so he was. Okay. There were stories like, and also Stefan E initially said that it was Marcus H. who shot. His first story was who shot Lübke, and then he changed it. He said, no, actually, I did it. It's true. No one really knows what happened that night. There are a lot of people who think that there's no way that Stefan E could have done it on his own, and that probably Marcus H. was at least with him waiting in the car or as a lookout or something, but nobody really knows, and he wasn't convicted, so we don't know. Well, whatever happened, he was not convicted of anything serious. So, but whereas Stefan E. is in prison for life. But the inquiry is going into the big question is, why didn't the Verfassungsschutz pick him up earlier? Because as soon as the murder happened, and E became like the main suspect, the Verfassungsschutz said, "Oh, hang on a minute, we do have a file on this guy." And then it all they quickly like went into the cellar where they got all these paper files out, and they realized what had happened, and they handed all that over to the prosecution. They said, okay. Because then they kind of realized, we really fucked up. And then the whole story of Walter Lübke, the reason why he became a big target for neo-Nazi circles was because during became called the refugee crisis in 2015, he was a local governor in northern Hesse, near Castle Wolfhagen, and he had to do a town hall meeting because they were moving a lot of refugees in, quite quickly. There was the time when there were a lot of people coming very quickly, and these local politicians were really up against it. Like they would literally get a phone call on a Tuesday and said, you've got 5,000 people come in who need accommodation by Friday night, and then they would have to pick a town, often a sports hall or somewhere, just to find somewhere to put these people. And then they would do these town hall meetings to explain to the local population why 500 people are going to move into your village at the weekend, Yeah. So he did a lot of these things. And at this one particular meeting, a lot of people from do you remember Pegida? This sort of...
I always refer to them as your mates, I think, because you were reporting on them. I was like, you've been hanging out with Pegida again. Yeah. I do remember Pegida. They were kind of like this pan-European kind of racist things, but kind of probably the ones that tried to intellectualize it in some boring way. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a sort of people's movement of racist people.
Lovely.
And it's out of that the AFD kind of grew out of Pegida. Although they would adapt. The AFD became the sort of political Pegida, basically. The political wing of the Pegida.
Lovely. Lovely.
There's one particular...
If shit things could stop having, political wings, that would be great.
So, at this one particular meeting, it was they were the Kagida, because it was the castle version of it, so they were called slightly different. They sent a lot of people there to this one meeting, and Walter Lübke was getting heckled a lot by these really right-wing people. There was about 400 or 500 people in the hall, And it's all on, and at one point he said, well, look, people who don't agree, I'm going to get the quote wrong, but people who don't agree with these principles, with the democratic principles of Germany, they are welcome to leave the country at any time, right? He said something like that. He said,
well, fair fucks to him.
Right, yeah. He said he made this declaration. And then Markus H. and Stefan E. were both in the room. They were both at that meeting too, standing at the back, filming. Markus H. was filming on his phone, and he took that clip and uploaded it to YouTube a couple of days later. That became like a huge... it just focused a lot of hate on him from the whole...
And you can understand what an incendiary remark that is.
For right-wing people.
But there's so much... Yeah, absolutely. There's so much you can... You know, like you said, you can hear that man's frustration having to deal with this. Look, I am of the belief, and I think it's sort of actually backed up with having immigration and refugees and having like a relatively open border policy is a good thing. And I understand that if it's your job to go and explain to people on a last minute basis why this is happening while the media are like whipping up a frenzy about it, like that's really hard.
Yeah.
And you can hear the frustration in his voice. You all just fuck off. Like I didn't fucking like none of this is necessarily my, help. So, but that's fucking terrifying that someone is constantly filming you and then going to upload it and you become this hate figure for trying to do your job in what sounds like a relatively decent way. I don't know.
So on the day I was at the inquiry, his press spokesman, so one of his assistants, was one of the witnesses, and he described he was there that night. He was also, he was on the stage and he was like advising him and everything. He described being really moved in that moment, and he said like when he came off stage, I just really wanted to hug him, because I thought it was really a powerful thing to say. And he was talking about this, and then he said in the weeks it was his job to field all the hate emails. He got phone calls, people calling and saying like, why did he say that? Why did he say this? So he was like fielding this thing, and he said we were just so busy at the time anyway, and then I had to write a press statement saying that this clip was taken out of context, and this is, it was part of a longer speech, and he was like trying to, explain the kind of frenzied atmosphere that was around at the time. Anyway, so 4 years later, Lübke was murdered by a neo-Nazi who was in the room at the time. So that kind of, he'd remained a sort of hate figure for the neo-Nazis, and this guy shot him. And then so one of the other witnesses on the day that I was there was a policeman of the so-called Staatsschutz. So I didn't know this either until I went to Wiesbaden. But
I'm glad you're going to say this. I was like, I have never heard of the Staatsschutz. Shit. Maybe I shouldn't drink while I'm trying to input my
So,
like, why am I always a bit pissed when I'm trying to learn things?
So there's apparently the police forces have their own little units that are for political crimes. So the Verfassungsschutz is the domestic intelligence agency.
Yes.
So they have more powers, so they can do surveillance with phones and everything. Whereas the Staatsschutz are basically an arm of the police who concentrate on political crimes. And this guy was like testifying, and the one of the MPs asked him, were you following Kagida, this group at the time? Were you taking pictures of them? Were you trying to track down their networks and everything like this? And the guy said, no, why would we, And he said, well, like, look what happened.
Because they're fucking...
Yeah, he said, like, that would be just too much work. He was, like, saying we were really busy, and we can't...
Busy with what? Would be my question, because I feel like I know the answer.
So that's the kind of other strand of it, is like, what does the Staatsschutz actually do? And then one of the questions that he was asked was, did the Verfassungsschutz ever get in touch with you, or did you ever get in touch with the Verfassungsschutz about Kagida, about these right-wing networks, about Stefan E. and Markus H.? And he said no. He said, like, normally what would happen is if something happens that is bad, and the Verfassungsschutz knows something, they would tell us, but we wouldn't ask them, and so if they didn't tell us, then we wouldn't ever know. There was always like one way stream of information. So yeah, some people found that a very unsatisfactory answer.
That is an incredibly unsatisfactory answer, considering. Oh God, right. So.
And they were also saying that we had at the time we had all these other problems. We were looking for Islamists. We were looking for Kurds.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. That's what you were doing, weren't you? Fucking lads.
Yeah. No, they said that. They said
but
that at
this
the time.
Is also,
the focus was somewhere else at the time.
This is what's so incredibly frustrating, because this is not... We don't have... In terms of scale, now, belatedly, we've recognised that in the new coalition contract, where they said like right-wing extremism is the biggest threat to German security. But we've already had the whole fucking fiasco of the investigation of the NSU murders, where Turkish Germans and other people who didn't conform to certain ideas of what a German is were being like picked off at random, and the investigation insisted on being like, no, it's gang related.
Yeah.
Because how could it possibly be anything else? Which is just so appalling, and like would investigate the people's families and everything of these innocent like victims. Not like all victims are, I don't really like the term innocent victim. No one deserves to be a victim. But anyway, and then it's like, okay, so now, ages later, the same stuff, and they're like, well, we've got too much on our plates. We're looking at the right-wing ones. I'm like, they're the ones doing all the killing. Maybe start with them. Do they not go to the top of a fucking priority list somewhere? What do they got to do?
Yeah, I mean, this is what is being asked in these inquiries. What is going on with anyway? So,
and that's also the same. That's two horrible crimes you talked about, like the killing of Walter Lübcke and Hanau, and both of these people were known to the Verfassungsschutz beforehand.
No, I don't think the Hanau
one was. I just looked at it.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sent a whole fucking manifesto being like, contact me whatever, and they were like ghosting him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's like when I try and talk to the Berliner Senat.
Yeah.
The Bildungsministerium.
So do you want to hear about my second trip?
No, because yes, fine.
So
how's your Megacan?
Very much enjoying it.
It is good, isn't it?
I'm not flagging.
I genuinely don't know how people do these things if they're not drinking.
I don't know either. Other podcasts seem to get by without alcohol. Other politics podcasts.
Maybe I'm just like, anyway, I'm trying not to get too... I'm trying to be balanced, but this is frustrating. But yes, sorry.
Then I went to Frankfurt a week later, and for the beginning of a new case, a new trial. You mentioned the NSU, and one of the lawyers who represented the victims' families of the NSU was sent several threats by email from someone who signed themselves the NSU 2.0. The thing about this was that she was a Turkish lawyer, and she said, in my career, I've had a lot of death threats and whatever. I get loads of like weird people writing in, but in this case, this guy knew my daughter's name and my private address, which she'd moved secretly, and this guy knew it and put it in the email. So she was like pretty scared, and she decided, in this case, I've got to press charges because I need to know how he found this out, because this is about
fucking terrifying.
So this is all about a plan of like a couple of years ago, and at the same time, I
vaguely heard about this. Is this mentioned in that Day X podcast?
Yeah, it might be.
Which, if anyone wants more Nazi content, is really, really good podcast. I think it's New York Times.
Anyway, yeah. So at about the same time, a far right network was uncovered in the Frankfurt police, specifically in this sort of. They had like WhatsApp group, and they're sending anti-Semitic messages to each other in this
they're
WhatsApp group.
Always doing that.
Several police officers were suspended, and there was like an inquiry and everything. But this lawyer said like only the police knew this information. How did this guy get this information? Anyway, they caught him. They caught him because he was I should say allegedly, because he denies all this. But they caught him. He even denies being right wing. But anyway, he's like.
Oh my God.
They caught him because he was on a chess website. This is what the police say. They found he was chatting on a chess website using similar insults and threats and racist language that was in these emails. So they searched his house, and they did find. They caught him, right?
I feel like chess didn't need to be dragged into this. Fucking hell, lads. Is there nothing you could just...
Well, anyway, This is, they did like the searches. I mean, I don't know how computers work or anything, but they did like IP addresses and whatever. They caught him. He lived in Berlin. He's a 54-year-old man living on his own. And they traced these emails to his address. There's like 116 of these threats, not just to this lawyer, but to several prominent left-wing politicians, entertainers, writers. Jan Böhmermann, if you know who Jan Böhmermann is, the comedian. He's the comedian, kind of left-wing comedian on TV, a satirist. He got a load of emails. He sent, they're all death threats, like what you can imagine what kind of stuff. But he also sent bomb threats to this very courtroom in which he was he's being tried in, and a bomb threat to a school that had been named after Walter Lübcke, like a school in Walter Lübcke's hometown, which was named after him after he died. And he sent a bomb threat there too. And, the school had to be evacuated, everything. Like, it's like nothing was ever found. They didn't find any explosives, it was just threats. But he was obviously spreading terror, He was deliberately spreading terror around. And so his trial started. Now, the thing about this trial is that only he is on trial. No police officer on trial.
So he's not a police officer, so we still don't know the link between like how he got
exactly
that sensitive information from the lawyer.
Right. So there are two different explanations for how he got this sensitive information. The prosecution says, so the state prosecutor said that he pretended to be a policeman and phoned up other police stations just from his landline and said, oh, by the way, for this thing I'm doing, I need this address. Mm-hmm. The lawyer and several other politicians and other people who have received these threats said that is not plausible. You can't just pretend to be a policeman and get that kind of information on just with a phone,
So it's whether we want to believe the police are incompetent, and have lack security.
Yeah.
Or are systemically and systematically racist.
So the prosecution said that they also did investigations into several police officers. So they've found out that this information was accessed on police computers, and they interviewed the relevant police officers who use these computers, and they said we didn't find enough evidence to prosecute anyone, right? And obviously for this lawyer and for all the other people who received these threats, that is not enough. They want to know like that the inquiry has to go further. There has to be more investigating. And so that was, so you have to imagine, I went into this courtroom. It's kind of this dingy courtroom in Frankfurt where Stefan Ehr was convicted last year. It's the same. They only have one courtroom big enough for big trials in Hessen, so they just use the same one.
Grim.
And it's a sort of 70s style. It's a bit kind of dingy because it's very dark in there, and it's all kind of plywood paneling. It's not. And so the first day of the trial was just the reading of the charges, which took 3 hours because the prosecutor stood up and read out all 116 offensive emails and messages, and the guy was sitting there, and had to listen. And he, as soon as it finished, he was like, "Let me just say a few things." He got up and he really wanted to talk, and he said, "I've written a statement." And his defense lawyer said, like, "No, do it tomorrow. We're not doing this now."
Sit down, twat.
Yeah, it was really like that.
I'm so sick of listening to you.
It was like, sit down now. Come on, this is going to take too long. So the next day we went back, and he gave his statement and he gave his explanation. And he said, in his explanation, he said, like, I have been used by these corrupt racist police officers as a useful idiot. He used the term useful idiot. I joined some right-wing forums on the darknet last year, a few years ago. And yes, we were discussing politics. And yes, some of the politics was right-wing, like he was talking like he read out a written statement. And during the course of this, I realized that a lot of the people I was talking to were police officers. And when they were talking on this darknet forum about this lawyer, this Turkish lawyer who they all hated, and apparently the police officers all hated this lawyer. Anyway, and then he says, like, one thing led to another. He didn't really talk about whether or not he sent these emails. He's basically claiming these emails were sent by
the fairies,
corrupt police officers, racist police officers, and they arrested him on trumped up charges. And so he's kind of slightly in his defense, like his defense strategy seems to be to use the fact that it's not really been explained how he's got this information to blur the things. He came in and he stuck two middle fingers up to the court as well. That was the other thing that happened. He's still in his handcuffs. And then the next day he said he apologized for that.
I mean, he's obviously got some fairly severe, like, I'm not, that's not a justification in any way. Oh, Jesus.
So that was my other time. That was the other thing I did last week. That was in Frankfurt.
Okay, so
which is just down the road from Wiesbaden.
I guess we'll see what happens in his trial. How long is that going to go on?
Oh, at least several months. I mean, they're planning till the end of April now, but I expect it'll be a bit longer than that.
Okay.
It just depends because the what they call in German the Nebenkläger, so the plaintiffs who are, if you're the victim of a crime, you are represented in court separately by your own lawyers. So the prosecution is one team, so to speak, and then the other team is the victims and their lawyers.
Oh, interesting.
And the Nebenkläger, in this case, this Turkish lawyer, and I think a lot of Linke politicians also got these threats. Okay. And I think they're represented in court by certain lawyers.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Is that like a separate
Yeah, because the prosecution has one, and then what will happen is the Nebenkläger... Is
that a little bit like having a criminal trial and a civil trial? Is that just...
Sort of in one? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Could be. Maybe it's something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, you have a right in German court, if you're the victim of the crime, to have your own lawyer in the trial to represent your specific take on it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So... We'll see. So and obviously in these cases, in these right-wing cases, the argument, the plaintiffs will also be slightly questioning the prosecution's explanation of these events as well, you know, whereas the prosecution will just be all about trying to get what can we definitely convict him of, and that will obviously mean their interest is in narrowing it down as much as possible and not answering. This is why we have parliamentary inquiries, because they're supposed to answer the wider questions.
For so long, and like, is there not some way we can marry? Yeah, it just everything, and we just keep saying this. We just need to overhaul everything with new thinking, because it just doesn't. I don't even know. Like, oh God. Right. So yeah, that was lots of Nazis, and again the questioning of the political leanings of the forces that are supposed to protect us from the Nazis.
Yes.
And why they seem to do continually such a shockingly poor job when it comes to investigating far-right crimes or preventing far-right crimes or not being far-right.
I think that things have changed a little bit in the last few years, because I think there are definitely, because of all these news stories and because of these murders that have happened, I think now, you know, even Seehofer, when he was Interior Minister, was saying, we're going to recruit more and more, you know, special anti-right-wing task forces. And now we have a new Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser. And she is someone who had a reputation for, you know, taking this seriously already. So I don't know. I think it's probably like, it's not something that the politicians haven't noticed, and that that something has happened. But you know, the government of Hesse, for example, he kind of he's called Volker Bouffier.
I know, I've heard of him. I love
the state premier
so much.
State premier of Hesse, who was actually in the news, to come back to the beginning with Hanau. He kind of made this statement, you know, saying we have to fight racism wherever we see it. He basically cleared his whole police force after, you know, a few years ago when this WhatsApp group came out, when they said that all these Nazis said like, oh, we did the investigation, we got rid of a few bad apples, it's all fine now, you know. And and you could feel that he's from the CDU, and you could feel that a little bit in the parliamentary inquiry in Wiesbaden. The CDU was trying to narrow down the scope of the inquiry, whereas the Linke ones were much more like, we have to root them, you know, we have to get into the Verfassungsschutz and
and it is like a conversational shift as well. It's not like this idea of, in addition to actually investigating crimes that have happened and like perpetrators of like racist stuff, it's also about investigating our whole structures and going, how can we all be more like anti-racist? Does our police force, it's not just being like, oh, we don't have active racists within the police. It's like, is our police force anti-racist? Are we? Yeah. And that is a bit of a conversational change that I think has happened and is becoming more and more to the forefront. So hopefully we will see that. But I mean, Germany just does everything so monumentally slowly.
Well, also, it's the politicians, they're the ones that are in power anyway. Their instinct is always to defend the police. I mean, that's that because they feel like, oh, we have to, you know, we can't, they can't, the police can't be besmirched. We have to like, we have to. Yes, we know, root out corruption, root out the bad apples and everything, but we can't systematically put, as they say, put the whole of the police under suspicion. You know, there's a sort of, so I think that is always like a problem, I think, with these things, because that's their instinct. That's what they feel like they have to do as government representatives. You know, and I think that is sort of problematic.
And it's not even, yes, some individuals do need to be like held accountable for their actions, but it's also just about like, we should all be getting more comfortable, particularly as white people in positions of authority, with being critiqued and criticized and having these difficult conversations, because like, I think that's literally costing, like, we might be uncomfortable, or it might cost like reputation, or we might have to change some things, but it's like the lack of that is costing people's lives. Like it's disgusting that we would sit there and be like, we don't want to besmirch or like put the police under suspicion. And it's like, well, fuck you.
I know, and that's why I think it's not our remit, but I think that what Sadiq Khan did in London is actually really good, because Cressida Dick, the head of the Metropolitan Police, she said, I presented a plan to change whatever, you know, to root these people out, and Sadiq Khan said, I looked at the plan, it's not good enough. You're going to have to resign now. And I think that is quite a powerful thing for someone in power to do, because it's not, that would not normally happen. And I think that could really happen in Germany.
I am ignoring UK politics entirely because
they had the same scandal. They had almost the same kind of scandal there with, like, you know, racist, sexist police networks. Yeah. And it's kind of like, I think that's actually, it's quite surprising, because he could have done it a few years ago, but he did it, you know, and that's like a thing that happened.
And like, you know, think about, like, you could have the possibility of making the police like just actually do what they're supposed to do and be like really cool and sexy, and you know, everyone would want to be in the police, even like all the lefties. They'd be like, yeah, like all my super woke kids would be like, I want to join the police because I want to, you know, as opposed to just being like, oh, they're quite shit and racist, so no one good's going to go and join them. Okay, well,
a different world is possible.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think it is. I mean, either reform the police, so they're going to have to make megas like 20%, but keep the prices the same for the sake of all of our sanities in Germany. I don't know. Do we want to have any more discussions?
We've been going on for quite a while now.
We have been.
Would you like to?
I'd like to hear about one other thing that you mentioned on another trip, which it was the same trip to Hessen, but you didn't have to necessarily
write about Nazis.
Exactly. Where did you go?
At the Goethe's house.
Tell me about Goethe's house, because I went to Goethe's house last year in Weimar.
Yeah. This is a different house in Frankfurt where he was born, where he was allegedly born.
Yeah.
So what happened was, you go into this house and it's all like, looks really old fashioned and fancy. You think, oh, this is really house. And you go through all the different rooms. You go, like, you see his sister's, bedroom. You see his, like, where his dad's library is, the kitchen, with the water pump. I was quite like the water, but they had a water pump inside the kitchen. I thought that was pretty cool. And then you go to the top floor, and it said, "Oh, by the way, this house was bombed in the war, and we had to rebuild it." So it's not a real house, then, is it? But apparently, what they did was they
Goethe's House of Lies.
So they had it all, but all the stuff that was in the house was original because they'd rescued it. They'd kept it. They moved it out.
So it wasn't bombed.
No, it wasn't all burnt down. So the books in the library, for example, were all originally Goethe's dad's books. He had
that is quite cool.
And you could look at his books, and his mum's. She had her favorite drink was hot chocolate, and she had a tea set which was especially for hot chocolate.
That's nice.
It had lids on because apparently, if you don't have a lid on the cup, then the skin forms. There's a little notice.
Oh, yes.
So a hot chocolate cup is slightly different from a teacup because it's got a lid.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was a nice bit of porcelain.
I like that detail. I enjoy going to Weimar and seeing Schiller's house and Goethe's house.
Yeah.
Schiller definitely the sexier of the two.
He died much younger. He was only about 30 when he died, Schiller.
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was quite sick, wasn't he?
And Goethe was 80.
Yeah, I think generally Schiller though was a bit more revolution. Would have been cooler. Yeah. I went there for a whole Kursfahrt for German. They were all talking about Schiller and Goethe, and I was like, who's the.
Yeah.
But also be skeptical because it's Germany, so all might not be as it seems, and they may have lied to you because of something bad that happened to do with National Socialism, which means what you're looking at is actually a sham. That is your takeaway for today.
On that note. On that note.
Anyway, no, I think hopefully things are changing. You think it's fine. We'll just have to see, I suppose.
Yeah.
I hope everyone is fine. And wear your rain boots because it is pissing it down out there.
Yeah. Buy a brolly. A Knurps. Yeah. Buy a Knurps.
What's a Knurps?
It's what Germans call brollies.
I've never heard that.
It's a company that makes brollies, and now people... Well, my granny, she used to call all umbrellas a Knurps.
I love that. I'm going to say Knurps from now on.
It's one of those small umbrellas that you can put in a bag that fold, telescopes, so you can... It's small.
Yeah, the first one I bought of those, and it was also very German, but I had no control over my Knurps. Yeah. And I remember being a young kind of person working and I was pouring with rain and I couldn't get it to control, and this whole busload of Germans just looking at me who is this foreigner who does not know, who has no command over her Knurps? I was
She has no command over her Knurps.
Yeah.
And then it suddenly pops and explodes in your hand.
Oh, it went everywhere. Oh, it was a disaster. An absolute fucking disaster. I was
You silly.
Anyway, on that note.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, I think, for all of that.
Yeah, I'm glad I got it off my chest.
Yeah. All right. Have a good week, everybody.
Yeah.
And bis gleich.
Bis demnächst. Tschüss.
Tschüss. That was a very German ending.